The iPhone Fold is closer to reality than ever. Reports say Apple's first foldable iPhone is already in production, with launch timing tied largely to whether the company can finalize and trust its hinge design. But before you get too excited about dropping around $2,000 on the iPhone Fold, there's a much more uncomfortable number you should think about first. How much of that money you're likely to lose in the first year? New research suggests that if the iPhone Fold follows the same resale patterns as existing foldable phones, a $2,000 foldable iPhone could lose as much as $1,292 in value in just 12 months. That's an eye-watering hit for anyone who likes to upgrade regularly, trade in, or resell their phones. Foldable phones versus traditional phones. The harsh reality of depreciation. A new analysis from Resale Marketplace. Cell looked at the 12-month resale performance of flagship smartphones from Apple, Samsung, Google, Motorola, and OnePlus. The study compared modern foldable phones against regular slab smartphones, the classic non-folding rectangle you're probably used to. The result is brutal for foldables. On average, owners of foldable phones lose $997.69 in value after just 1 year. By comparison, owners of traditional flagship phones lose about $605.32 over the same period. That's roughly a $400 difference in real money leaving your pocket if you decide to resell or trade in after 12 months. Look at it in percentage terms and the gap is just as bad. Foldable phones lose 64.6% of their value, within the first year standard flagship phones lose 55.3% of their value. In other words, after 12 months, foldables retain only 35.4% of their original launch price. Regular flagships keep around 44.7% of their original price. So if you buy a $2,000 foldable, the resale market is telling you that statistically, it might be worth somewhere in the $700 range a year later. That's a serious premium to pay just to be an early adopter of a different form factor. The worst offenders, foldables, that bleed value. When Cell ranked devices by how much money they lost over a year, foldables dominated the losers table. 5 of the 6 biggest value drops came from foldable phones. The single worst performer in the study was the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 1TB. Within 12 months, that device had shed an incredible $1,479.99 in value. That's the kind of hit you'd expect if you took a luxury gadget out of the box and immediately tried to sell it as used. Why do foldables get hammered so badly? They're still perceived as experimental. Buyers worry about creases, hinge durability, and long-term reliability. New generations improve quickly. Each year brings obvious hardware and durability upgrades, making last year's model feel obsolete faster than a normal phone. The audience is niche. Fewer people are shopping for foldables on the used market, so demand is lower and prices fall hard. If the iPhone Fold is priced at the top of the market and then behaves like these existing foldables in the resale charts, early buyers could be looking at 4-figure losses in their first year of ownership. Apple's secret weapon, resale value. However, there is an important twist in this story. Apple doesn't behave like everyone else when it comes to resale value. The same study shows that Apple's lineup, and especially the iPhone 16 range, holds its value noticeably better than rival brands after 12 months. The iPhone 16 lineup retained about 51.5% of its original value. OnePlus held around 46.8%. Google phones retained roughly 48%. Samsung sat at about 39.5%. Motorola trailed badly at 24.5%. That's a huge gap in real-world terms. The result is that 9 of the 10 best-performing phones for value retention in the entire study were iPhones. Whatever you think of Apple's pricing, the market consistently rewards iPhone owners when it's time to sell or trade in. This matters a lot when we start guessing how an iPhone Fold might behave. How much might the iPhone Fold actually lose? The scariest number you'll see thrown around is that $1,292 projected loss in year 1. That figure assumes the iPhone Fold would depreciate just like the average Android foldable. In other words, it's the worst realistic case drawn from the current foldable landscape. But Apple isn't Samsung, Google, or Motorola when it comes to resale behavior. If Apple can extend its iPhone 16 level value retention to a foldable device, the story changes. If the iPhone Fold performs more like a regular iPhone rather than a typical foldable, the projected first year loss drops closer to $970 instead of $292. That's still a big number. I know, one is popping champagne over losing nearly $1,000 in 12 months, but it's more than $300 better than what we see with competing foldables. So we realistically have two broad scenarios. Android-style foldable depreciation, $2,000 iPhone fold potential loss in 12 months, up to 1,292 iPhone-style value retention. $2,000 iPhone fold potential loss in 12 months, around $970. In both cases, you're losing a lot of money quickly. The main difference is whether the iPhone Fold behaves like every foldable before it, or whether Apple's brand strength and buyer confidence can cushion the fall. Should you buy the iPhone Fold at launch? This is where emotion and logic start to clash. On one side, you have the data, which quite clearly argues for caution. On the other, you have the excitement of Apple's first foldable, a new form factor, and the simple desire to try something radically different on day one. Let's break down both sides. The case for waiting. First-generation devices usually take the biggest hit across tech categories. Version 1 of any new product tends to depreciate the fastest. The moment version 2 is announced, it signals that major issues have been fixed, and the new version is the one to buy, pushing down the resale value of the original. Foldables already have a bad resale track record. The numbers aren't speculative anymore. We now have real-world data showing that foldables lose more value faster than traditional phones. Buying a first-generation foldable from Apple means you're stacking an unproven product category on top of a brand-new design. Hinges. Durability and long-term confidence. Apple is reportedly taking its time to solve hinge design concerns. Even so, the first generation is where hidden durability issues sometimes show up. Dust ingress, screen creases, subtle hinge wear. Waiting for version 2 or 3 can mean fewer surprises and potentially better resale value. Resale value and upgrade flexibility. If you like upgrading annually or every 2 years, depreciation matters. A first-gen device with weak resale makes future upgrades more expensive. You're effectively paying a tax for jumping in too early. If you look purely at money and risk, the logical move is to wait. Watch how the iPhone Fold actually performs in the wild, and see where the second generation lands. The case for buying at launch, and yet, there are valid arguments on the other side. Apple rarely discounts its hardware. If you're hoping to wait 6 to 12 months for a significantly cheaper iPhone Fold direct from Apple, history says that day may never really come. Apple tends to keep sticker prices steady through a device's life cycle, occasionally offering modest promotions but rarely dramatic permanent cuts. Being first has its own value for some buyers. The thrill of experiencing Apple's first foldable iPhone, exploring its software tricks, and having that wow factor in your pocket is worth the financial downside. If you plan to keep the device for several years, the annualized pain of depreciation feels less severe. If it flops, discounts can appear, but that's a gamble. There is a scenario where the iPhone Fold underperforms badly, similar to how the iPhone Air ended up needing discounts in markets like China and saw repeated price drops via third-party US retailers. But relying on a flop to save you money is a risky strategy. You're basically betting against Apple's ability to make its own foldable succeed. You're buying an experience, not an investment, if you go in knowing that this is not a financially sensible purchase, and you accept you're paying a premium to be on the cutting edge, you're less likely to be disappointed. Just don't convince yourself that you'll get your money back in a year or two. The data says otherwise. The smart way to think about the iPhone Fold if, and when the iPhone Fold arrives, the safest mental model is this. Treat it as a luxury passion purchase, not a rational investment. Assume you will lose a 4-figure amount in resale value over the first couple of years. If Apple's historical resilience in the used market carries over, that loss might be a bit smaller than Android foldables, but it will still hurt. If resale value, trade-in performance, or upgrade flexibility matter a lot to you, waiting for later generations is the more sensible move. For everyone else, the iPhone Fold will be a device you buy because you genuinely love the idea of a foldable iPhone, you're excited to live with it every day, and you're comfortable with the fact that it's not a place to park your money. If that's you, then depreciation numbers are something to be aware of, but not the thing that stops you hitting the buy button.